I'm talking about the new and improved celery. I'm going to do a whole viral celery phenomenon that is just going to knock your socks off.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the International Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Today we're going to be talking about the Wilmington Blue Rocks, who play in Wilmington, Delaware. They are a Nationals affiliate at the High-A level. Later on in this episode, I'll be speaking with Nick Matarisi, who designed their Copa de la Diversión brand. And I will be speaking with my own mom. You'll find out why later. And of course, Dan Simon is here with another of his Studio Simon Stumpers. Right now, I am so pleased to welcome to the podcast Mark Lavis, who is the Director of Web and Creative Services with the Wilmington Blue Rocks. Mark, good morning. How are you doing?
Good. Happy to be here.
You have the privilege, I would say anyway, of working at one of the gems in minor league baseball. This is a beautiful ballpark. It is like less than a half hour from where I grew up in Wayne, Pennsylvania. I love getting to Blue Rocks games. I love the crab fries down the right field line at Chickies and Pete's. That's a really fun amenity there. I'm going to jump right in and just ask you, how did the Wilmington Blue Rocks end up with a name based on rocks, a logo based on a moose, and a very prominent alternate identity based on celery? We'll talk about the celery one later on, but I'm curious about the rock-based name and the moose-based logo.
Well, certainly. So the current iteration of the Blue Rocks is the second version of the team. The original one played back in the 1940s in the Interstate League. They were also known as the Blue Rocks as well, and the name refers to a blue granite that is found on the bedrock of Brandywine River just north of here in Delaware. And certainly within the state of Delaware, there is a nice synergy amongst the teams around the color blue, whether it be the Wilmington Blue Rocks, the University of Delaware Blue Hens, or the Delaware Blue Coats in the G League. So certainly that name, when this team came about in the 90s after moving from southeastern Virginia, it stuck right back in. And shortly after that, obviously we needed a bit of a mascot, and our owner at the time was a big fan of the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. So certainly there is a nice tie to that, with the name Rocky being very kin to rock, and then Bullwinkle having a very similar tone. So very much slid right in, gave us a nice iconic looking mascot.
The moose has not always been part of the logo, the original logo of the current iteration of the Blue Rocks. For just 1 year in 1993 was like this angry dude busting out of an outline of the state of Delaware with a baseball bat, and he is clutching a blue rock in his hand. That logo only lasted 1 year. Is that one that you're familiar with? Do you ever see that there? Is that one that ever comes up like as a retro night or anything?
I would say you see it once in a while in the front office. Certainly that logo is akin to logo design of the era.
Yeah.
Having been a bit of a sports logo buff myself, it certainly reminisces me about like the old roller hockey league, and where this very sharp lines, very aggressive mascot. And certainly nowadays, especially minor league baseball, it's far more of a family friendly environment. So having something like Rocky, who's far more engaging with kids, he's great fanfare at the Frawley Stadium when he ever walks around the grandstand. So certainly it was a little learning lesson, I would say, for the Blue Rocks organization, but one that was of the era.
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely has a 90s feeling about it. I would hate to see what it would be like to try to embroider that logo. It's got a lot of real thin lines, a lot of detail. That would be pretty difficult. After that one was a sort of classic baseball convention when it comes to logos. You had an interlocking BR. It was just the state of Delaware, and then interlocking BR, and then a script Blue Rocks above and below. And then that lasted till 2002. And then in 2003, there was another logo that was big, thick, slab serif BR with a pickaxe chopping a hole basically in the middle of the R. That lasted in sort of different colors from 2003 to 2009. Does that have the same nostalgic value as those original ones from the 90s?
I would say since we have had a few iterations of the BR over years, it's sort of one of our phases, I would say, as an organization. It's much akin to our original 90s logo that you mentioned prior. So certainly we've evolved over that. We now have a new one that Brandios unveiled in 2010 that we've adjusted the colors over the years on. And certainly we're very much grounded in that state of Delaware silhouette within a BR logo. It's very much akin to the sport of baseball. Every sport kind of has that unique identity. For example, in soccer, every team has to have a roundel logo, and in baseball, every team has to have some sort of interlocking letters as a logo.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very much a convention. There is still one that you all used, a much more elegant one that was unveiled in 2010 with that Brandios update. The brand that exists now, the update that was made in 2010, it was a huge upgrade and really terrific logo. Blue Winkle, the sort of snorting moose. He's a great tried and true character here. Obviously, I grew up in the area. I know that there are not moose in the area. People love them though. They love them because they think of them as like this sort of like goofy, round, like pet at a national park that you could go give a hug to. They're nasty animals, moose are. That's I mean, it's a pretty, like, if you want a sports mascot, having a moose for a mascot, they're pretty mean so far as animals go. Do you all take the moose is mean, he's going to flip you over his antlers and into the woods, or is it more like the cuddly, round cartoon character moose?
I would say, given our current mascot lineup, he'd be very much more akin to the Yogi Bear style friendly moose. Very much akin to the old classic Bullwinkle character of being very much kid friendly. And certainly we'll talk about in a bit, Mr. Celery. He's reserved for the more hip and edgy things that mascots get into nowadays.
The hip and edgy things that mascots get into. Yeah, we will touch on Mr. Celery here in just a moment. But I have to ask, you mentioned before we started recording that you grew up out west in Washington State. Did you see moose growing up in Eastern Washington?
I would say I saw quite a bit of elk. I never saw moose. Moose would probably be a bit further north than where I grew up. I certainly saw plenty of elk roaming around.
Okay. I've seen moose maybe like 4 or 5 times up in the mountains in Colorado. There's like a specific pass. There's a moose visitor center not far from here, and they're pretty amazing to see. But yeah, they look like animals that you could just go like scratch on the head, and they will wreck you if you try it. So, on the other hand, not menacing, as we've been talking about, Mr. Celery. Mr. Celery has a great origin story. I love sort of the nonsensical nature of where he came from. Can you talk about, why Mr. Celery, who Mr. Celery is, and why Mr. Celery is part of the team?
It's interesting having Mr. Celery as a mascot because within minor league baseball, he's arguably one of the only mascots that don't directly tie to team's identity that in many respects has usurped our team's identity. So certainly we have had that balance of blending in, the existing Blue Rocks identity as well as Mr. Celery. So for example, like I mentioned earlier, with regards to color changes over the years, we have now made an effort over the past couple seasons to integrate green instead of dark yellow into our designs, which came from about our time as a Kansas City Royals affiliate.
I mentioned at the sort of the outset that this Mr. Celery was closely tied to the primary brand. And yeah, what I mean by that is, like you say, visually, it's entirely different. The Blue Rocks obviously are blue and yellow, and Mr. Celery, obviously that whole brand is all green. I wrote about the Blue Rocks back in 2014, and I spoke with the general manager at the time, Chris Kemple. He said that there was, when they first moved into the stadium, that Aramark had left behind a bunch of food-based mascot uniforms, like a mustard bottle and a ketchup bottle, and Celery was one of them. And that he went to the California Carolina League All-Star game out in California. It might have been Lake Elsinore. And he said that they had a pink bunny rabbit that came out every time the California League scored or when Lake Elsinore scored. And so he decided that he was going to do something every bit as random as that. And so he had this celery costume who he decided would celebrate every time the team scored. So just absolute glorious randomness in minor league baseball. I totally love it. What are the ways? I mean, you talked about this brand becoming sort of more prominent than the primary brand. Is it something that you see reflected in sales? Is this something that you see fans gravitating towards in the team store?
Certainly, I would say when it comes to our merchandise efforts, we've definitely, when we can, try to balance both Rocky and Mr. Celery. So, for example, we have a plush of both, and certainly they restock frequently during the season. We have our own little Mr. Celery section in the corner of the team store as well that has specific merchandise tied to him. And then I had the pleasure of watching our players over the course of last season, and certainly when it came to batting practice and whatnot, they kind of gravitated to our wearing our Mr. Celery promo items and our Mr. Celery hat. So I think it's something both players as well as fans have gravitated to, and certainly can only be seen as a positive.
One last question for you, and then I'll let you get out of here. But the colors of the team in 2010 with the current brand that exists now were based, I think, heavily on the fact that the team was affiliated with the Kansas City Royals. That affiliation ended in 2020 when Major League Baseball reshuffled all of minor league baseball. The Nationals ended up with a much more convenient Major League affiliate, but the brand, of course, stayed the same. Does the affiliation with the Nationals change anything about your approach as a team to your branding and your identity?
I would say to a certain degree in the beginning, before I had arrived, it was seen as something that we could latch on to. For example, we introduced sort of a curly W around a state of Delaware
Mm.
logo around that time that has since sort of not, we still favor the BR
Mhm.
instead of the curly W, but and then there was also the potential to have like a kind of a third alternate where we would use the Nationals colors. But I think from our brand identity perspective, it ultimately made sense to sort of stick with what we were doing in terms of the shades of blue, and then simply swapping the Kansas City Royal yellow for Mr. Celery green. And because of that, I think we've had a more complete and whole brand that we can work off of and engage with fans in the state of Delaware.
I didn't even make the connection between W for Wilmington and W for Washington. Of course, the curly W would make sense to work that in some way. Mark, thank you so much. This has been fun to talk about the Blue Rocks. I'm thrilled to finally feature them on the podcast. Where can people find you, and where can people find the Blue Rocks online and on social media?
You can find the Wilmington Blue Rocks at bluerocks.com, and our various social media handles are WILM Blue Rocks.
Mark, thank you so much. It's been a treat to talk to you, and I look forward to getting back to the ballpark, hopefully on Mr. Celery night again. There's nothing I like more than watching him run out and celebrate every time the Blue Rocks score. Best of luck in the coming season, and we'll see you at the ballpark.
Great to be on.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased to be speaking once again with Nick Matarese, who is with the Barn Creative in Delaware, proper Delaware, home state of the Wilmington Blue Rocks. Nick, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Doing well, doing well.
This is really fun for me to be chatting with you. You did the Copa de la Diversión brand for the Wilmington Blue Rocks.
Yes.
That just released. It is relatively fresh when we're having this conversation now. It's just been a couple of weeks, I think, since it came out.
Yeah, I think like 11 days or something like that. Yeah.
The Copa de la Diversión program, we've talked about it a lot on this podcast.
Yes.
But for the uninitiated, if you're new to the podcast or if you're new to minor league baseball, the Copa program is there are now 98 teams in minor league baseball, affiliated minor league baseball. 98 of the 120 are doing essentially Spanish language brands in an effort to reach out to Spanish-speaking baseball fans. So, I'm curious because you and I have talked about the Billings Mustangs previously, and one of the points that we discussed in that conversation was the fact that you are in Delaware and you're creating a brand that has very much a sense of place for a place that is not Delaware. And so
Yes.
here you are creating the Copa brand for the Wilmington Blue Rocks, the Rocas. I'm going to give it my best here. The Rocas
Yeah.
Azules de Wilmington. Creating a brand for a team that's close to home. Tell me about
100%.
that before we talk about the Copa brand. How much did you get into the significance of the original brand? The meaning behind Blue Rocks.
I would actually say a lot.
Okay,
Dave Heller and I, the owner of Main Street, CEO of Main Street Baseball, who owns the Blue Rocks, all that
sure.
fun jazz. We've been talking a lot because of Billings, the same ownership group, and that's something as a local that I don't want to say it's kind of drives me nuts a little bit about their current brand. They've actually completely gone away from why they're called the Blue Rocks. And it's not something that everyone knows in this little area, but as a designer and a sports designer in this town, you kind of become a local historian to a degree. And the Blue Rocks were literally why we were founded, when the Swedes came over, kind of stuff. There's still, I think churches and some of the foundations of some of the oldest buildings in Delaware use blue granite. You can go to the quarries of where this is why they landed here, because they could use this stone. So when we were kind of thinking about team brands for the Copa brand or division, or what I just say Copa.
Copa is fine.
I just say that. Yeah, I just say the Copa League. It was something that I definitely wanted to push. We had a couple of ideas for names that were fun, but everyone just kind of was out of the gate, let's go quote unquote simple and just say, Blue Rocks. And I was like, okay, well, can we bring the rocks back to Blue Rocks? It was a sticking point for me personally. Because when the Blue Rocks first came out, there were a lot of pickaxes and all of those things. And then, was that probably about 10 years ago, they shifted to, it's a good brand, don't get me wrong, visually, but there's no rocks. There's no rocks in the Blue Rocks. And it was kind of a sticking point for myself that I wanted to make sure we had some rocks.
Well, so now you're touching on, which was essentially my first question about this Copa brand that you created. You're working in this Copa brand with both the primary identity, which is Blue Rocks, or at least the original primary identity, which is the Blue Rocks. Yeah. But then you have also dressed up Mr. Celery in a very sort of festive sombrero and poncho looking thing here. So let's talk about the Blue Rocks first, because that was my first question for you. You went back to basics with this. This is a very sort of I don't know, maybe a trite to call it like a Flintstone-y look, but a very
no, that's what a lot of people are calling. That's kind of our joke. Let's go fun. Again, the Copa League, as I just loosely call it, is about being fun. In reality, it's not, it's about bringing in more people. It's about having fun with it. So let's have some fun. So it is less serious. So let's just, let's talk Flintstones. Let's talk, Fruity Pebbles. Let's kind of really get into rocks, and have some fun with it.
One of the things I notice about this is that some teams, but I would say it's probably a smaller percentage of the teams, do a direct translation of their name, and other teams create an entirely new identity. Was that part of this conversation, whether to do a translation of Blue Rocks or a different identity?
Absolutely. Something that has never been seen is we actually did two. One is a non-direct translation of something that's completely off the wall, which I love, and which is definitely still in the back pocket for the Blue Rocks. They do that in the future if this does well or whatever. And then the other was a direct translation. And they went with the idea of let's go with the direct translations as our first, foray into the Copa brand. Let's see how it, touches locally and all that fun stuff.
So you have this, this very sort of textured, rocky feeling. There are some details in here that I want to talk about. So it's like a three-dimensional rock. It's in the Blue Rocks colors of the navy blue and the light blue. Dare I call it a Carolina blue? I don't know if I'm going to call it a Carolina.
Most people, in the sports industry, everyone just knows that's Carolina blue.
All right. So you've got the Blue Rocks colors. So that obviously ties to the original brand.
Yes.
They have not done rocks like this in their previous brands. They've done kind of like rock characters. They certainly,
Yeah.
like you said, they've had the pickaxes. So you did, like a sort of rocky type, very sort of bouldery
Yes.
feeling type with a pickaxe. And the pickaxe is part baseball bat. The handle of the pickaxe is a baseball bat there.
Yes.
So how much of this for you was back to basics, back to the origin of the name, and how much of it was creating something new? Because this brand is unlike
Yeah,
it
I mean,
ties.
truthfully, being a local, I actually think it has a lot more of, let's call it updating
Mhm,
older ideas or updating original ideas.
mhm.
Like most people, in Delaware, I actually still have like a bat from the inaugural year, like sitting in my house somewhere. But like if you look in like the early 90s and things of that, I actually think late 90s, like
Yeah.
there was definitely like a pickaxe bat
Mhm.
and there were like little, chips coming off of it. So it was really like, what if we took this idea and really just updated it? And it was kind of a connection back to that. And that was really one of the details of like, where'd you get the bat axe or what we're calling like the bat axe, the bat pickaxe.
Mhm.
Um, it was really like, well, that's actually in the brand
Mm.
from like 98 or 2001 or whatever that is. And in the original logo, it was like a guy with a bat or a pickaxe or something, like with a hard hat, and he's like holding a rock or something like that. And I was like, okay, like how do we kind of tie all these things back together?
So Mr.
Yeah.
Celery is such a big part of this brand right now, and there
Yeah.
is no connection to celery with
Yeah.
Wilmington, Delaware. A couple of details that I want to talk about in this Blue Rocks
Oh, yes.
identity that you created here. Those who are familiar with the shape of Delaware, as I am, as being a person who grew up very close to the state of Delaware, the shape of Delaware has been incorporated into previous versions of their logo. And here it is as the counter form of the letter O in
Yes.
Rocas. There's also like a little star in
Yes.
the A, the counterform in the letter A there.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about those two shapes. How much of a challenge was it to work those into this design?
Yeah. So it just being from Delaware and all this, like my joke is we pretty much have the same slogan as the Marines, the few, the proud, the Delawareans. Like Delaware is such a weird state where we're so small and we're not really known for much, but everyone's oddly proud that you're from Delaware just because no one's from here. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
no, I'm not from, it's just odd. There's all these like little things that are just very weird. So it was kind of like you got to work the state in there somewhere, like just because of who we are.
Yeah.
And then the star actually comes from the the idea that Delaware is the diamond state. That's kind of like all these things. So that we've trying to work in again, we work with the Blue Rocks like for little things on the side. It's like, how do we work in the diamond and the idea of, like a glimmer or a star or shine from the diamond into um their branding a little bit because again, one of those things, if you're from Delaware, it's the Diamond State. It's just one of those things. Um, so and that's kind of where that comes from was definitely the state shape. It's got to be worked in. It's who we are.
Yeah.
And then, the if kind of concept of a diamond or a glimmer, that we're trying to work in a little bit.
I get my back up a little bit still after all these years at the Wayne's World joke about we're in
Hi, I'm
Delaware.
Delaware. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And like the
Yeah.
joke that Delaware is boring. Wilmington, Delaware is a great city with lots of cultural things. And
Yeah, it really is.
my daughter and I did a college trip recently and we were looking at the University of Delaware. We stopped in
Great school.
Wilmington, actually went by the
Yeah.
ballpark and got a t-shirt
Oh, yeah.
and had lunch right there on the river, beautiful river going through Wilmington. My
Yeah.
parents are going to go see the musical Come From Away in Wilmington.
Yeah.
That's
Our joke is that Delaware's kind of like the suburbs of the 95 corridor. Like everything is like an hour and a half away. You've got,
yeah,
especially if you're in Wilmington, it's like
yeah,
the beaches are an hour and a half. You
yeah,
can go to the mountains in an hour and a half. You got Philly, you got DC, you got Baltimore,
yeah.
like New York's a day trip. Like there's not a lot in Delaware and Wilmington in realms of like when people think of these big things to do, but everything's within arm's reach. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like if you wanted a little bit more quiet, it's easy to find. But if you
Yeah.
want to go to those big things, it's right there. It's right there. It's right there. It's
Yeah.
right there. So it's definitely like this nice in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And the beaches are beautiful, like Rehoboth and Lewis. Like these are, I mean, these are beautiful beach towns here. So
Love it.
yeah, absolutely. It's it's a great state. So this whole notion of like Delaware is boring, I don't know where that came from. There's a lot of other states out there that you could have picked on, I think, Mike Myers and Dana Carvey. All
It's
right.
okay. We're used to it.
Okay, okay, I know. And I'm not even from there and I get my back up about it. So
Yeah.
I'm also used to defending New Jersey all the time. So it's, we go to the Jersey Shore. So often, with these Copa brands, you have created a brand for the Copa de la Diversión for the Blue Rocks, but then you created like an alternate based on their alternate.
The
And
alternate, the
Mr.
ultimate.
Exactly, right? Like, and
Yeah.
Mr. Celery is a huge, part of this brand, right? Like, I mean, when you go
Yes.
into their team store, which, like I said, I just did fairly recently, there's a lot of Mr. Celery stuff there. I've been there on Mr. Celery night, and they've given out the bobbleheads. I have a Mr. Celery hat here, so like,
Nice.
I've fully bought into the Mr. Celery logo here. This branding that they have right now, the existing branding was created by Brandios, including Mr. Celery here. You updated this character to have like a sombrero and like a poncho, and he's swinging the bat axe as you called it there.
Yes, the bat pickaxe. Yes,
the bat pickaxe, right? And so he's still. So it's basically. I mean, it looks like the original artwork. If I'm not mistaken, it looks
very
like the original
close.
artwork
Yes.
to the one that Brandios created, and then you have added elements to him. The first question I have about that is like this is the first thing that pops into my mind when I see this sort of thing is like, what are the conversations that you have as a designer with the team, with maybe the community or whatever, about the sort of sensitivity issues here, right? Like not delving into like stereotypes, but actually like celebrating the
it
community.
Was definitely a conversation.
Yeah.
And it was something like out of the gate, I don't ever want to step on someone's toes or accidentally do something. So definitely was one of those things that I went to the team. I was like, look, you kind of asked for this and these are these things. It was like, this has got to be vetted. It's just like, it has to. And they said, and they were like, yes, we went internally, we have our team, and they were like, yeah, it's fine. And because we're having fun, it's fine. I always say that just in the idea of sports in general and that conversation, it's, are you celebrating or making fun of?
Right.
And I think the consensus when, they did their internal thing was like, nope, you're celebrating, you're fine. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, and it's not personally my culture. So I need someone from the culture to be like, you're okay. I won't say know what you don't know. It's like the ignorance in like the true meaning of the word. Like, I do not know, like, I'm fully fine on being educated, but if I'm wrong, fire me down. Like, this is not, shoot me down now before I accidentally do something stupid. Yeah.
Well, and I think that precisely what you said. You're not speaking for someone. You're making sure that you're collaborating with the community. And I knew that was going to be the answer. I didn't tell you that question was coming, but I knew that was going to be the answer, because I think it's also possible, to go too far the other direction. You can celebrate and still have fun, right?
Yeah,
like,
100%.
so this is a fun character, and you've added these elements. So tell me about these specific elements, the sombrero and I'm calling it a poncho. It might not be, that you added.
I'm a big Big Bang Theory fan. So there's like a poncho versus sombrero episode. So I would go doing it. But it was one of those things where we had a couple options. Some were, brand specific colors and pattern, like the pattern was there, but they were in different colors. And it really just came up with actually other brands around the league, and everyone was just like, no, let's go colorful. Like, let's dive in. Like, let's not, go, oh, well, the pattern's there, but and then especially you get like this big and it's embroidered and you're gonna lose it. So it's like, let's just go colorful. And it really was that simple. In reality, there was like one sketch. It really, before we went into Vector, it was one of those things where we talked it out, we did all these things, and everyone was just like, that's it.
Yeah.
Usually there's a lot of back and forth, and it was just like, nope, we're good. Go with it. It's everyone's in. Yeah.
When you're updating a brand that was created by another designer, I have so many questions about this. Like, do you recreate that artwork in Illustrator? Do they send you the artwork?
I have all of their like official Vector, brand stuff.
Yeah.
And we kind of like drew over it, I guess, but we
Okay.
did have to make some alterations.
Yeah.
Like it ends like our first piece of celery, we needed to like bring it in for a bat and
Yeah.
things like that.
Okay.
Um, like small edits, the things
Yeah.
like that, how do you work like the eyebrows with the sombrero and like
Right.
all those things.
Right.
But it was actually kind of easy in the realms that I
Okay.
say that. And it was when you're designing something from scratch, there's so many what ifs.
Yeah.
Well, what if he's doing this? What if his head's like this? What if his head's like
Mhm.
that? What if, all of those things had been figured out before. So it was really like being able to have more fun
Yeah.
because like the blank canvas syndrome was gone. It was just
Yeah.
this idea of like, I know what we need to do. I know what we need to stick to.
Yeah.
Okay, this is it. All right, now what if he's wearing a hat? What does that look like? You just have a little bit more fun with it
Yeah.
because you don't have to worry about kind of like the wheels falling off. Like you've
Right.
got a good base.
I would think that working with, with a logo, with a pre-existing logo would force you to adapt your own style to it. Like, like Brandiose,
Yeah.
famously does, sort of thicker line weights, right? Like, and they
Yes.
do, there's a certain sort of visual aesthetic to Brandiose's work. Was it a challenge, or is it a challenge for you as a designer to adapt to another designer's work
I
like that to make it feel like
probably,
one piece? Yeah.
yeah, I would say probably, but maybe because I'm local or maybe because we have similar things when it comes to baseball, I found it easy with this project specifically.
Okay.
I literally just, I mean, personally, I just went through the logo. I brought it up big and I was like, okay, for the most part, their line weight is X. I brought it in like for the technical, I brought it into Illustrator, went
Yeah.
real big. It was like, okay, for the most part, at this scale, the line weight is at, 12 point.
Yeah.
Keep to 12 point, or like the best that you can. Obviously you make your little adjustments, but for the
Right.
most part, for this project, it was easy.
Okay.
But yeah, it was, you could really be a challenge there if you're in this style and you want to go to this style.
Last question on this. Do you have a sense at this sort of early stage, now that they're out there, which of these two logos has generated more buzz? Which one you're seeing?
Everyone loves Mr. Celery, but I think that's local. I don't know if that has anything to do with branding and more just like the community loves Mr. Celery. So that is going over really well. A lot of people are saying exactly what you're saying. There's the Flintstones vibe.
Yeah.
And people are just having fun with it right now. So I will be curious in the next, let's say, month. Like, what are sales? Is it shirts with Mr. Celery or is it shirts with, the name?
Well, Nick, this has been so much fun to catch up with you again. I love talking about this. I mean, this is a ballpark I've been to a few times, and it's a brand that I know well. And so to see this update to it and to talk specifically about the COPA program has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you hopping on. Where
Yeah,
can people find the work that you're doing?
Honestly, the quick stuff is find us on Instagram. But essentially we're The Barn Creative across the board, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and we're thebarncreative.org. If you want to go to our website.
Well, I know that you've got some other baseball projects in the works that
Yes,
we can't
indeed.
talk about on air. Not that this is air, but that we I know that you'll be back on the show and we'll have more to talk about. So I look forward to that. In the meantime, thanks very much. Happy baseball season, and we'll catch you next time.
Have a good one.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased to welcome for the very first time to the Baseball by Design podcast, my own mom, Kathy Caputo. Mom, hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Paul. I am okay.
I should say, for the listener at home, in case you could not hear it in my mom's voice, I dragged Mom kicking and screaming into this interview. This took a lot of badgering, so I really do appreciate Mom coming on to talk about this. I have told this story a couple of times on this podcast in a sort of cursory way. I'm so glad that you are here to tell this story with your own words. We went to a Wilmington Blue Rocks game. You did not know that this was Mr. Celery Day. Nevertheless, you had in your purse, you snuck in illicitly, you snuck in food in your purse. Not, like most people sneaking in alcohol into games or, the other kind of things that people might do at a game. You snuck in a bag of celery. So my first question is, baseball stadiums have a lot of great food options. The Wilmington Blue Rocks, they've got a Chickies and Pete's. You could have gotten a cheesesteak and some French fries and a beer. You certainly could have gotten an ice cream helmet. They've got some great ice cream helmets there. So before we talk about Mr. Celery himself, why did you have celery in your purse?
Well, I really wanted to avoid eating the typical baseball stadium fare. Like the last thing I wanted was a Chickies and Pete's cheesesteak, or I may well have gone to get ice cream later on, but the celery was there for my own self-protection.
I may have inherited my love of ice cream from you, actually. You're an ice cream fan as well.
Absolutely. I think that comes with Philadelphia.
Yes, absolutely. You have probably also against your will a handful of the ice cream helmets in your home, and we will at fancy family affairs, holidays and whatnot. We will bust out the stash of Phillies ice cream helmets that we have in your cabinet. If anyone could see your house, they would know that ice cream helmets don't exactly match the decor. Is that entirely for me, or does that have anything to do with your 7 grandchildren or your 2 other children?
Well, it's mostly for you. Um, but the real thing I have against them, even though they don't quite go properly with my Lenox china and my sterling silver, the real thing I have against them is that they don't fit in the dishwasher nicely. And so
Well,
it means that they need to be hand washed.
right. That also helps preserve the logo on the front of them, which is also
Well,
important.
that's the other thing. I don't like to put plastic in the dishwasher.
So you don't like to put cheesesteaks in your body, and you don't like to put plastic in the dishwasher. So
I don't sound like much fun, do I?
well, you're you're a lot of fun, Mom. We have a great time at the shore together every summer. You at least you're the game player. You'll play dominoes with us. You'll play when we're all together playing games. Dad, Dad the philosopher is not the game player, but Dad likes baseball, and we'll sneak bad for you food at baseball games sometimes too. So it's a toss up as to who's more fun.
Dad went to a game one time and ordered a salad, and the proprietor of the stand told him it was the first salad he had sold that day, and it made him wonder how long the salad had been sitting there in the stand.
It was at a Reading Fightin' Phil's game, and they had a spinach salad, and Dad ordered it. And it
Right,
was like one of those like record screech stops. Everyone stops
right.
and
I
looks
think they
to.
started to ring a bell and all sorts of
There
things.
was confetti. The first customer to ever order the spinach salad at a Reading Fightin' Phil's game. Um, the
Um,
but there's
Well, the
a
other thing about the Mr. Celery Day was
oh
I
yeah,
did not realize that it was an illicit piece of celery. And
right,
I was sitting there munching the celery when you called everybody's attention to it
yeah.
and thought it was hilarious because Mr. Celery was out there dancing around. And then, I figured that the long arm of the law was going to reach out and
Yeah.
arrest me.
I actually tweeted the team with it because I figured they'd be in on the joke. And sure enough, I tweeted a picture of you eating celery at Mr. Celery Night, and they didn't come and throw you out of the ballpark, which may, who knows, have been sweet relief for you. We would have found you at Iron Hill with a beer, I guess, at that point. So what I wanted to ask you though was, there's a pretty wide gulf between getting a Chickies and Pete's chicken cheesesteak and cheese fries and a beer and a bag of celery in your purse. Is there really nothing at a ball game that you can order that would make you feel okay? A pretzel?
Yeah, well, pretzel's just a bunch of empty calories.
Yeah, but that's another
Just
Philadelphia thing.
just a bunch of, yeah, I know. I like hard pretzels actually.
Could have snuck some of
But
those in.
uh well, I may have done that at other times. I don't know. I just didn't want to be up there roaming around those stands,
Oh yeah,
hoping to find something. I figured if I had something with me and I wouldn't starve to death,
yeah.
that I'd be okay. And I think I may have had some carrots too, Paul, actually.
Oh, there were
Is there
carrots as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I was going to ask
Is
about
there
this.
a is there a Mr. Carrot Tops, something or other Carrot Tops?
There are no carrot tops, and I consider that a slur anyway. So I'm glad that there is not.
All the players would have red hair.
The ginger vigils. The Buffalo Bisons play as the Buffalo Wings, and I think they may have a carrot mascot because you serve
with some
celery
blue
and
cheese
carrots.
dressing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe, but I'm not sure. There are a lot of teams that have agricultural based alternate identities or just agriculture based identities. You've got the Modesto Nuts because they're in the Central Valley in California. The Stockton Ports, also in California, do a Mr. Asparagus. In fact, I think his name is Asparagus. There's the Cedar Rapids Kernels are based on corn.
Yeah.
There are a lot of teams that have like these sort of agricultural based nicknames. The Mr. Celery story is kind of hilarious. It has nothing to do with anything to do with Wilmington, Delaware. It's just a random costume that they found at their ballpark when the new ownership took over. It was left behind by the previous owners, so they decided to bring Mr. Celery out to celebrate every time the team scored a run. So that's how come he's out there dancing on the field. I was going to ask about.
Also, they were environmentally aware. They repurposed a costume that they found rather than put it in a landfill.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. They were reusing it. I think that's
Yeah.
absolutely. Celery is a negative calorie food. I understand it takes more calories to digest than you actually get from eating celery. You didn't augment this. It wasn't like what do they call that when you put like the bumps on a log, the ants on a log, when you put like peanut butter in it and then you put raisins on it. You didn't have any. You weren't dipping it in
Yeah.
anything. You didn't have
Yeah.
peanut butter on it. You were
Right.
just eating straight celery at a baseball game.
When I was a kid, when we had holiday dinners at my parents' or my aunt and uncle's, we would have a garnish tray of olives, usually black olives
Yeah.
and green olives.
I love
But in the
olives.
middle, there would be a whole bunch of celery sticks that were stuffed with loads of cream cheese, so that they were definitely not
That
negative
was not
calories.
negative calorie.
Yeah, they were delicious.
Also,
We
not what you were eating at the baseball game.
Not what I was eating at the baseball park. But had we not had dinner at home, or were we not going out to dinner afterwards? I can't remember. I think my sense of the where the sun was in the sky is that it was sort of early evening. So I mean, was it dinner for everybody? I mean, I certainly did not have celery for dinner. I mean, I must have I must have done something else.
It was an
It's been
afternoon
a
game, I
while,
believe.
Paul.
It has been a few years. Yeah, and looking at the pictures and the people who are in those pictures, I can tell you it's been a long time. It was a day game. And it was,
Well,
so
we were
that would
probably
have put
going
it
out
at
to dinner
like,
afterwards then.
we probably did. We may have gone to Iron Hill and gotten some beers there. The Iron Hill Brew
Yeah,
Pub
we might well have. Yeah.
that's a great spot. We, by the way, will be hitting the Wilmington Blue Rocks on Baseball Palooza this year. So if you wanted to come join Baseball Palooza with a bag of celery, bring celery for everybody, and the guys will really appreciate that, I think. So
I don't know. Those guys don't look like celery eaters to me.
I'm going to tell them you said that, Mom. We got one guy in the group who survives entirely on chicken fingers and French fries, and I think that's been true for about 3 decades. So, and he's still alive. He's not sneaking celery into any of these games that we go to. So. All right, Mom. Before I let you off the hook here, finally, I will ask you if you were in charge of concessions at a baseball game, what would you recommend that they have for people with your food sensibilities going to a baseball game?
That's a really good question. Pizza is good. Is there usually pizza? As long as it's not like, greasy pizza. And chicken that's not loaded with breading, and maybe some, well, I guess it's too much to ask to say whole grain breads. Maybe I'll have to think about that some more.
All right. Well, we can have you call back in. I think that pizza and grilled chicken that's a pretty good answer. The Rockies have like a salad bar. There's like a kiosk that's just a salad bar that I've seen people
Oh, well,
actually
yeah,
line up for.
that'd be nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
to do that and have some, protein components of it and some, so that would be, I mean, that's a really good idea.
And I don't know now that I think about it, because it's not a stand that I seek out. I don't know if I've seen it since COVID.
I would imagine that you do not seek that out, Paul, knowing you.
Mom, we did it. We made it. We're all the way here at the end of the interview. You can disconnect. You don't have to dread this anymore. Thank you for coming on and talking about your experience eating celery. Oh, I do want to ask you one last question. Were you afraid once I called everyone's attention to it that they were going to come admonish you or take away your celery?
I didn't really think I would be treated too harshly for what seemed to be a fairly minor infraction.
Especially given all of the souvenir plastic stuff I had around me. It wasn't like they were losing any money on our group. So
I was going to say, we were a pretty big crowd at that point. We must have
yeah.
been, what, 10 or 12 people?
Yeah, it was a big group that we had there. So it was
Yeah, I think you usually ensure that. You usually make sure to drag as many people as you possibly can.
well, it was Mr. Celery.
When was it? Do you remember when it was?
I want to say it was like 2018-ish, like around there. But it was important to me to have a big group there because it was Mr. Celery bobblehead night, and I wanted to make sure we all got our bobbleheads. Which reminds me, I don't recall seeing Mr. Celery bobblehead prominently displayed in your home anywhere when I've been home for the holidays. Where is the Mr. Celery bobblehead, Mom?
I don't believe I received one.
Oh no, we got to get the
You
Blue
mean
Rocks.
every one of the 12 of us would have had a bobblehead?
I think maybe some folks got there, maybe didn't prioritize the bobblehead as much as others of us, and maybe anyone who arrived a little bit later than the others may not have actually gotten their bobblehead. Also
We would have all
possible.
gotten there together. We own only 2 bobbleheads, Mike Schmidt and Pope John Paul II.
That's that is great. How come they're not on the mantle? I want both of those on the mantle. I don't think I
Mike
knew that
Schmidt's
fact, Mom.
downstairs on one of the bookcases with some other baseball stuff. I believe the Pope is in a drawer somewhere.
Oh no, we got to get that the Pope John Paul II bobblehead. That needs to be on full display somewhere. That's an amazing trinket. Mom, that's an amazing fact to end on. Thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be?
I don't know. I never
Uh,
liked the sound of my voice on the answering machine, so but I won't hold that against you. It's not you can't do anything about that.
When you say answering machine, you mean a literal answering machine that is attached to a landline that records people's messages when they call. It's an actual answering machine.
That's right. Yeah.
Which you don't see many of these days.
Well, that's what it is.
So if you want to,
I see that one every day.
Normally I ask, where people can follow you on social media or, what's your Twitter handle or what's your website. And I think, Mom, I'll just ask if you want to give your phone number out so people can leave a message on your answering machine. All right.
I think I'll pass on that, Paul.
Okay. So Mom says no, you don't get Mom's a phone number here. So Mom, thanks for coming on the podcast. And
you're welcome.
You can let me know when you want to come on again.
Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. It is time once again for your favorite segment on this podcast, Dan Simon's Studio Simon Stumpers. Dan, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning to you, Paul. I am fantastic. The sun is shining bright. It's a glorious day here in Louisville. And with today's stumper, I don't have any big lead in. So why don't we just jump right into it, all right?
We're going to get right after it. Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Our Studio Simon Stumper today asks, which of these rock-themed team names was that of an actual independent minor league baseball club? Was it A, the Rock City Rockers, B, the Rockland Boulders, or C, the Rock Island Liners?
I'm trying to think of how liners relates to rocks. Am I allowed to ask that question if that's one that you made up or if it's real? Am I allowed to ask the connection of what a liner means to rocks?
You may ask. I'm not going to, I don't think me telling you this will give up whether it was made up or whether it is the correct answer. When I said these identities were rock themed, I should have said or been more specific and said these names with the word rock in them. There's actually a famous folk song called the Rock Island Line. sung by many people, probably most famously Johnny Cash. As a matter of fact, we had a CD when my kids were little that were all train songs, and one of them was Johnny Cash's version of the Rock Island line. And so that's why Rock Island Liners.
Okay. So I don't think there's going to be an independent baseball team named after a folk song. So I'm going to.
You're eliminating that from contention.
I am eliminating the Rock Island Liners.
Leaves you with the Rock City Rockers or the Rockland Boulders.
The Rockland Boulders and the Rock City Rockers both sound like good possibilities. I don't recall coming across the Rock City Rockers when I was writing about the Green Bay Rockers for sportslogos.net. And then, of course, there's the High Point Rockers in North Carolina. And I don't recall seeing anything about the Rock City Rockers when I was doing that. Now, it's certainly possible that the Rock City Rockers existed and that just didn't come up as I was writing about those teams. So I'm going to eliminate the liners because I don't think the folk song is going to be enough of a connection for a baseball team. I think I might have possibly heard about the Rock City Rockers when I was writing about the Green Bay Rockers or the High Point Rockers. So I am going to, by process of elimination and some moderate sussing, go Rockland Boulders.
Okay. You are correct, sir.
All right.
They play in the Frontier League. They currently play in the Frontier League. However, not as the Rockland Boulders. They were the Rockland Boulders from 2011 to 2019, after which they changed their name. They didn't move, but they changed their name to the New York Boulders. For those of you who are not as familiar with Rockland County as I am, the name is derived from the rocky terrain along the Hudson River, which is where Rockland County is located. It's just north of New York City. So that's the Rockland Boulders. Now, the other names could have been names, but your sussing was very good this time. There is indeed a city called Rock Island. Actually, there are 3 of them in Illinois, Oklahoma, Washington. I've been to Rock Island, Illinois, and it is the Rock Island line that I mentioned was part of the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad. And it was often just referred to as, even though Chicago, that's kind of a lot of words for one line. So it was often just called the Rock Island line. And that led to the song I mentioned that Johnny Cash famously performed. And then Rock City, now I don't know if there's any rock cities in the United States, but if anybody has ever driven through the South, which, Paul, I would imagine you've done a number of times. Have you ever come upon a Rock City barn?
No.
Okay. Rock City is a destination in or on Lookout Mountain, 6 miles down from downtown Chattanooga. And back when the people who created this Rock City tourist destination, when they created it back in the mid 1930s as an advertising idea, the owners paid a small amount of money to anybody who had a barn to let them paint on the roof of the barn "See Rock City." And there were by the mid 1930s, there were almost 1,000 barns across 19 states with this on it. And because of time and weather, and you drive through the South or anywhere where there are barns, and you'll see a lot of dilapidated barns that have collapsed, and they're still out there, but they're not usable anymore. So barns being made of wood do deteriorate, but there are still a few of them out there. I've seen one in person myself, but these were on these like 2-lane roads, throughout the South. And once in the mid 50s, when the interstate highway system was created, it kind of rendered all of those roads, if not obsolete, people weren't using them to travel great distances. The only people driving on them anymore were people who lived in those remote areas. And that's why you don't see any more Rock City barns, because you'll be traveling on an interstate to get to Chattanooga. So,
I Googled this while you were talking about, just to see some pictures of these, and yeah, they're it's pretty interesting to see some of the things that they have written on them. One of them says, "See 7 states from Rock City," and we know from the Chattanooga Lookouts episode of this podcast that is a myth. You cannot see 7 states from any point in the United States, including Chattanooga. So that barn is lying to us.
well, if anyone out there ever goes to Rock City, I've never gone because it just, I have to say, it didn't sound that compelling to me. But in the gift shop there, you can buy birdhouses shaped like barns, and on the roof it says "See Rock City." And I've actually seen one of those. Somebody had one of those like hanging from a tree in my neighborhood. So Rock City barns live on, if not in actual size barns, you can in little ones that you can hang on a tree outside your house.
If they ever do get a baseball team in Rock City, they could borrow the old logo that Guy Gilchrist did for the New Britain Rock Cats, and they could be the Rock City Rock Cats.
Okay.
I'd buy a hat.
You'd buy a hat of anything.
You can find Dan Simon and his work on Instagram at @studio_Simon. It's always fun to see what Dan's posting over there. Dan, thank you so much. This has been fun as always, and we'll see you again next week. Wonder what the weather will be next week when we talk.
I am wondering that too. So I'll let you know next week. Bye.
See ya.